Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the artist, musician Patrick Dower, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has just written and published a book which is just available from all good bookshops and also online, which is titled Concrete Dreamland, Coming of Age in Underground New York, which is available from all good bookshops and also online. So this is the interview with Patrick. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Patrick, it's over to you.
It sounds like it was very similar to yours. We're the same age. And so I also had that love of glitter, all the bands that you named, T-Rex and Slade and Gary Glitter and stuff, of glam rock, I meant. But I also had the New York Dolls here on this end,
right?
Who were like a little grungy version of glitter. And Bowie is an extraterrestrial. I still am finding things on Bowie that deepen my respect and love for him. I had the opportunity of sitting at a dinner with him maybe 15 years ago. And he was just the warmest, most regular, well, not regular, but by regular, I mean approachable and funny and warm and you know, if I didn't know if it was David Bowie I was sitting with, I would just think he was just a really nice, kind, enjoyable bloke. But then he got up and performed, and it was there were only about maybe 20 people there, and I was right in front of him, and it was one of the most astounding moments of my life. Hold on a moment, I'm sorry.
Well, absolutely. I could imagine.
But see, I had the glitter, the glam rock, but I also had the funk. Because the 70s that year, 77, 76, 75, is the best music ever. So I had Parliament and Funkadelic, Earth, Wind and Fire, and Sly Stone, who just died yesterday. I had that end, which was sort of like black glitter, black glam.
Yes.
African-American glam. And then I also had the British invasion and then punk rock.
Yes. So just, I mean, being very curious on your David Bowie story. So was that like 2010 you got to see him, or was that around that time that you sort of bumped?
It would have been maybe earlier, 2007 or 6. It was a friend of mine, Lee Blake, who's British, a proud Cockney, has an organization called she put on these affairs called the Black Ball, which were fundraisers to get antiviral HIV medicine to Africa. So David Bowie, was a great friend of Lee's, and Alicia Keys was there, and Damian Marley. There was a whole bunch of us, and I got to sit at that table with them. So I think that was, I want to say 2007, I think.
So did he perform with Alicia Keys that evening? So that was his last ever performance, wasn't it, in public, I think?
I don't think so.
Oh.
If it was, I'm really blown away. I don't think it was.
Because he died 2016 and he had disappeared, because I had seen him on that tour he did, Reality, and then it was like, oh, this is great, David's back, and he's doing the albums and the tour and catching him, and then suddenly he has the heart attack, and then he just goes. And for the first time, I mean, it sounds a bit strange, but the first time in my life, I'd never met him, but he always meant so much. he just wasn't there. He wasn't just appearing occasionally, and there was no sign. But occasionally you'd hear this, oh, he's done this live performance. Where? Well, how is he? What's happened to him? And this great mystery. So, and I think that Alicia Keys, and he did another one with Arcade Fire, but then he just and then he brought out his 2 albums, didn't he? One being Black Star at the end, and the one before. And I know, he just did appear. Yeah. So yes, I'm always curious.
Wow, if that's the case, I didn't know that was one of his last performances before he took that hiatus. It was he performed before the ball got really going, so there really weren't many of us there, and he got up and it was with Alicia Keys. And if you're right that was one of his last performances, I'm even more honored and astounded to be that, like talking with him over dinner, and then he gets up and sings, and I'm only a few feet away from him, and now knowing that maybe that was one of his last performances, I'm just blown away by that.
Yes. And also, wow. I mean, I know it's always a bit weird, but I mean, I think we have been slightly lucky in the sense of so many of these people have been with us all through our lives, and we haven't had to think. But now, as you mentioned, Sly Stone today, Brian Wilson, we've had to still got most of the members of the Rolling Stones and, various other people here, the Beatles, half them, so we're kind of lucky, but, but suddenly when they're not there, for some reason, it feels kind of like a bit discombobulating. At the same time, you kind of, in this insane world, quite nice to know that, that those people are here with us, even if they're probably a little bit elderly and shouldn't go up ladders if they can help it. But what was your childhood like then? Because obviously this is, probably quite an unusual childhood you had.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like everybody has an unusual childhood. Mine was being a biracial kid. My dad is second generation Irish. My mom is African American, and they were kids when they got married at a time when it was still illegal in a lot of states in America for interracial marriage. They were rebels, and they were just poor kids that fell in love, and they did the best that they could with me. They had their own traumas, and my family is rife with alcoholism and unaddressed traumas and mental illness. And my dad died when I was 15, and he had just gotten sober for the first time. So I think that, I wrote this book, and the first working title I had for it was Tales of an Unsupervised Childhood, because I feel like a lot of my childhood I was unsupervised, and although I was late to use this language, neglected. And neglect is a type of abuse, and it's a very subtle and insidious type of abuse, because you're not bruised, you're not beaten, although I did get beaten. But what it conveys to you is that you're worthless, that you're not worthy of attention and love. And that's something that I've carried and had to work on throughout my life. This idea of, my parents they weren't that invested in me. Because they were young, and I think they were going through their own things, and I've forgiven them many times over. I think they did the best they could with who they were and the times that we were in.
Yes, that's quite something. And did you have any other brothers or sisters that came into your life?
Yeah, I have an older brother. So I have 2 older brothers, and we all have different fathers. And my middle brother, Michael, was raised as my cousin because he was the product of a rape, and my mom couldn't bear to raise him, particularly because he looked so much like the rapist. So he was raised as a cousin, and when we got to be in our early teens, we kind of figured it out on our own that he was actually my brother. My older brother uh, also suffered with some mental issues and drug abuse, and so he wasn't home. He wasn't in the house a lot. He was often at rehabs or out in the street. So I was alone a lot.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
Yes. And what was school like at through these young formative years?
I got a public school education in New York, and in the early years, the city was trying this program of busing black and brown kids to white neighborhoods as a trying to integrate these schools, because even though New York is supposed to be super liberal in the melting pot, it was very, very segregated. And so I from first grade to fifth grade, I was bussed out to a school in Queens that was a neighborhood that was predominantly Italian and Irish and Jewish. Second,
Yes.
again, immigrants, but white immigrants, and it was actually, I mean, it was rough in a lot of ways, but it was also a blessing because we were talking about glam rock and my love of the Beatles and all that led to punk rock. And I don't think I would have gotten introduced to those things, to that type of music, hadn't I been bussed uh, out to a white neighborhood and made white friends, and they turned me on to, you know, Kiss and the Rolling Stones and so on. And I don't think I would have gotten that necessarily in my neighborhood.
No, that would have been very different. I mean, we have a slightly simplistic view of New York being in the 70s of being bankrupt, but being the sort of birth of rap, punk, and then disco. Did you sort of feel that there was that energy in the place, as well as amazing amount of poverty and desperation going on, that on one level great art, but on this on the other level horrendous, kind of like people just living on the streets?
Well, people are still living on the streets. That hasn't changed. But yeah, I think I really stop and give thanks for the fact that I was at the epicenter here in New York of so many movements that were in their genesis. Um, and I was part of it just simply by being here and being, a teenager and in my early 20s. So I not only witnessed, the birth of hip hop and punk rock and later, like you said, disco and all the things that went along with hip hop, the graffiti, the dancing, the style. Um, I not only watched it, but I was part of it. And I think I think the blight of the city gave a great background to the birth of these movements. Uh, and then even later, the Reagan years, there was a lot of great movement and music that came out of that kind of pushback to having a president that was had all these initiatives that was so anti poor people and people of color. Um, but yeah, man, dirty New York was grimy and gritty and dangerous and beautiful.
Yes, blimey. And what was your, can you remember your first gig you went to, the first concert you sort of trucked up to and went, blimey, this is interesting?
Do you know what? I think it might have been uh, in high school. I befriended uh, some older some older guys. They ran a luncheonette, but they were, when I say older, they were only in their early 20s, and I was a teenager. And they were into new wave and punk rock as it was really just starting to happen. And they took me to a show that was in a loft. And all I remember of this was I drank way too much. I was underage and trying to act like an adult. But the band was playing Elvis Costello covers, and I hadn't heard of Elvis Costello to that point. Um, but I fell in love with the music, and then Elvis Costello after that. They really turned me. So my first real outing like that, I think, might have been, yeah, I got taken to a loft, an underground party, and saw a three-piece doing Elvis Costello songs.
Yes. And did you sort of go to places like CBGB's and Max's Kansas City and start to sort of go to those areas, as well as the artistic community that was in New York as well? Did you start to gravitate towards those scenes?
Oh, I not only went to CBGB's, I played there a bunch of times.
Yes.
I play actually. I'm very lucky to say that I've played most of the iconic New York venues um, from the late '70s through the mid '80s. I think so. I played CBGB's many times. I was in a ska revival band,
Was that the
um,
Boilers?
the Boilers. Yeah,
The Boilers.
and we played everywhere. We played Limelight, CBGB's. God, the list is
Did you go to
Roxy.
was it the Mud Club? Was that one?
We didn't play the Mud Club, although I used to hang out there.
Was Tier 3 a club or live shows and danceteria? Were they kind of were they discos or whatever, or
No,
also bands?
I saw great bands at Danceteria and Peppermint Lounge.
Right.
Um, I saw I saw a great rockabilly band uh, that at Danceteria that again that sparked my love of that type of music as well.
That wasn't the Rockettes, was it? Lee Black Childers had a band called was it Levi and the Rockettes? Lee Black.
Yes, I know them. I don't know if it was them, but I know who
Right.
you're talking about. Yeah, yeah.
Because you had obviously you had the Cramps, but you also had the Stray Cats that came along, which kind of was another kind of scene, wasn't it? Which came out of New York as well.
Yeah, Stray Cats were by the time they were kind of big. I think they were already playing big venues. They came out kind of, they already had like an album and a whole thing going on. I never thought of them as an underground band, although I liked them.
Yes. And when did you start playing a musical instrument? When was your sort of musical moment that started to appear? Was that in the 70s or was that a bit later?
Let's see, what would that have been? That would have been, I was 17 years old. So the story is uh, my best friend and I were posers. We acted and dressed and hung out like we were rock stars. We were both into the Clash, and so we dressed like that. Clash and reggae, and our girlfriends were best friends, and our birthdays were only a couple of days apart. So for my 17th birthday, uh, my girlfriend and his girlfriend conspired to get us instruments because they basically said if you're going to act like rock stars, you should at least know how to play an instrument. And the joke is, I was supposed to get the bass guitar, and my friend was supposed to get the drums, but they mixed it up, and I ended up with the drums, which have been an incredible blessing in my life.
Well,
And I took to
yes.
them right away. Um, so I spent, yeah, that would have been maybe 78, 79. Um, and I just spent hours and days and months just practicing along to my favorite music, mostly reggae.
Yes, well, absolutely. Roots reggae in the 80s was kind of my. This
Oh
is
my
where I
God.
started going to gigs. So we had all those bands like there was Aswad and Burning Spear and Misty and Roots, and then Sly and Robbie and the Taxi Gang, and then Gregory Isaacs and Dennis Brown. So the 80s and Augustus Pablo and King
Yeah, dub,
Tubby. I mean, all that dub stuff was
scientist. Yeah,
was
yeah.
just awesome. So it was a kind of a golden period. I felt. I mean, the 70s I was a bit too young. Obviously, you knew like Bob Marley and various other albums that came along, but it was the 80s with that roots sound. And Sly and Robbie
Black
were just
Uhuru.
awesome. Oh,
Yeah.
yes, Black
Yeah,
Uhuru
Black
was
Uhuru really broke
with
through.
Michael
Yeah,
Rose. And
Michael Rose. Yeah, I got to play with him years later. We did um I played drums on Dub Side of the Moon, which was
yes,
quite popular. And
very popular. We all know that one, don't we, so well, actually. So
yeah,
then when you got to, because like, okay, so 1980, you would have been probably about 16.
I
Had
was
you,
yeah,
had you,
17.
had you left school at that stage? What was your sort
Yeah,
of
I dropped out of school.
quite
Um,
early?
yeah, after my father died,
And your father passed away when he was 15, didn't he, from a heart attack after?
I was 15. Yeah, he was just turning 40. He was a young man, and I was 15. Yeah, and then I was already unsupervised, and after he died, there was no one checking on me, and I had a little part-time job, and I was popular with the girls and stuff, and I was reading so much on my own. I just felt school was a waste of time, and I dropped out in the middle of my sophomore year, and sold weed and hung out and sold vintage clothes on the streets and albums and stuff, and played music.
Yes, and because there's that story you have when at your father's funeral, isn't there, where
Yeah.
his friend sort of pulled you to one side. You've been only 15. That's a hell of a story to hear, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, but I think I want to kind of forgive that guy, Bill Gross, because I think because I projected maturity, I think he thought that I would be able to handle that. Um, and he thought I had a right to know that my father actually killed my grandfather, and he it was very callous. Looking back, it was a horrible thing to do on the day of my dad's funeral to tell me that. But I really think he thought I should know it, and that I probably was mature enough to deal with it, and I wasn't, and it sent me into a spiral.
Yes, well, I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's like when you see a 15-year-old now, you must think, yeah, they're definitely a bit too young to deal with that kind of information. It was like horrendous. It was just
Yeah.
absolutely. So then, when the 80s came along, when did you start sort of being? You had the drums. Were you then just practicing, or were you in bands at this stage?
Yeah, both. I was practicing and in bands and projects. I don't know if I would call them bands. They were more like projects. We were uh, doing a lot of. I was playing a lot of reggae because I was also living in East Flatbush, which is a predominantly West Indian community. Um, I had a Cockney roommate at one point, and he said it was like the Birmingham of Brooklyn or the Brixton of Brooklyn at that
Right.
time. And so I was playing a lot of reggae, and I befriended a lot of Rastafarians, and but I was also really into new wave and punk rock, and particularly loving how the mashup of reggae and punk that the Clash did so well, and Stranglers and bands like that did so well. And then when the two tone revival came, that was perfect. It was exactly what I was into. That idea of the angst of punk, the energy of punk, but then the influence of reggae and the unity message.
Yes, well, there was the specials, and then the beat, and then the selector. So there was a lot of
Yeah.
social commentary going on, as well as great dance music. I mean, you got to love to dance, haven't you? But then, so you mentioned Elvis Costello and the Attractions, but and there was people like, there was Joe Jackson had come along, then the
Joe Jackson is
Buzzcocks.
awesome. Yeah.
And so yes, all these kind of bands, and Liverpool bands like Liverpool bands like Tears for Fears came along with Julian Cope. So you were sort of quite hip to the trip of these kind of. I would imagine they were quite big in the UK, but tiny in America. So you
Really
got
tiny. Yeah. Yeah. It was part of the appeal though, because it was sort of like you felt like you were in a special club knowing about these bands. Tears for Fears was a little more pop, but Joe Jackson was brilliant. And I was listening also to a lot of The Fall and Live at the Witch Trials. Who was
Oh yes, that's Marky Smith and the Fall. I was thinking actually of Teardrop Explodes with Julian
Oh yeah,
Cope, but I
yeah,
said
yeah,
Tears for Fears. So yes, correct.
yeah.
They came along a bit later, and they were a bit more polished. So I didn't quite go for them at that stage in life. But then it was kind of interesting because in that period we had that post-punk period, time, which I thought was good because punk had sort of died. But then we had that kind of the world of goth music started, the goth bands, and then there was the new Paisley scene that also happened, and then psychobilly happened, and then anarcho-punk started to come along as well, and then indie pop as well with bands like the Smiths started to kind of appear in sort of 83 onwards. So there was a lot of scenes, and then there was that new romantic world with the Human League and Heaven 17.
Malcolm McLaurin's band too.
Oh yes, there was
Wow, wow,
all
wow.
the Bow Wow Wow, Annabella, and that kind of troupe as well,
I had
which
such a
was
crush on her.
we all did actually. Yes, they were, and I think she's playing still actually, and I think there's two Bow Wow Wows now, one with her and one with the various members of the band, of what I can tell. But then we also 84 we had the smooth sound of Sade and bands like that, and Working Week, and then this kind of more sophisticated jazz vibe, soul music that started to appear. Well, so the 80s did sort of embrace all these different styles, didn't it? So were you sort of aware of all those different things going on?
There was so much good music happening, and you know what was great about it, like you kind of alluded to, the the bands were very much. I don't think it's quite the same today. It might be, but each these bands had their own vibe, their own movement, their own. Like this is a goth band. This is a new romance band. This is a smooth jazz band, or
It
what
was
they
very
call.
tribal, actually.
It's very, very tribal. And, I think maybe if I was in England, I would have been caught up. I would have had to choose.
Yes.
Where in America, we could pick and choose. And I liked what I liked from each one of those movements. Like, I never liked the Smiths, but I loved The Cure, and Sade, of course. I think it was just a wonderful time of there was a lot of musical hybrid going on, a lot of, I think, communication between America, influencing what was happening in England, and then coming back to influence what was happening in America. There was a loop, an amazing loop, actually, that, again, I'm not sure. For example, we were listening to Kraftwerk back in the mid 70s because they were so ahead of their time, seemingly, and funky. And but it was sort of an underground thing. And then Planet Rock came out when African Bambaataa used it. It was one of the greatest and first like really breakdance songs, and it was basically Kraftwerk. And so there was a lot of like we were looking at what was happening in England and Europe, and really being turned on by what they were doing to African American music, to funk, and to reggae. The reggae influence was so strong.
Yes, absolutely. And we had a DJ in this country called John Peel who was just very good at being curious about all sorts of new music. And he was the one who probably brought in those moments with people like the early Public Enemy album, Yo, Bum Rush the Show, and LL Cool J, his kind of Rock the Bells, and then all this other stuff on Def Jam and Sleeping Bag Records. And also people like Roxay Shante and the Real Roxanne, which I loved Roxay Shante. Were you also kind of interested in that early rap sound of Sweet Tea and people like that?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it was kind of I couldn't avoid it. It was the sound of the streets. But yeah, so it was just so fresh and new. And the thing is, that culture, the rap culture, the DJ culture, had been around for a really long time, but it hadn't been on vinyl yet. So people were rapping at parties and DJing at schoolyard jams, but I feel like after Run DMC, Sugar Hill, it really became like kind of codified, I loved it. Yeah, of course. It was my
I suppose
culture.
actually it was Grandmaster Flash, The Message, and The
Yeah,
Wheels of Steel. They were the
sure.
kind of early ones, weren't they? Which
Yeah.
was quite good. And then we also in this country we only had 3 channels, and then we had Channel 4. To do 4 channels, I know. Go the UK. But then they started showing people like Richard Pryor live on Sunset Boulevard, and we were like, oh my God, because we liked Lenny Bruce and people like that. So, and then Richard Pryor came into our lives, and I started collecting all these Richard Pryor albums. Were you also interested in the Richard Pryor?
Absolute genius. Yeah, of course. Uh, oh my God, Richard Pryor. Man, it's funny that you bring him up because we were talking about music, but Richard Pryor influenced everybody. Um, Absolute genius. Best comedian ever.
Yes, he could make having a heart attack quite funny, or
Oh,
and
getting burned up,
getting
smoking a
burned up.
freebase pipe, and still, yeah, no, Richard Pryor. I didn't realize he had an influence in England. I never thought of it because he's so American, so Black American. But yeah, Richard Pryor is amazing.
But they were, yeah, I was live on Sunset Strip. I just remember, and it was like, God, there was all these warnings before he came on because he obviously, did a lot of swearing. But we were just like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is the funniest thing we've ever seen. Just the way he paced the stage, the way his face manipulated, and the way he could
Great
speak.
storyteller.
Amazing, and it was
Amazing
just.
storyteller.
He had those couple of years, which was just genius. And then, bizarrely, there was a film called Trading Places, and then Eddie Murphy comes on, which is a very smooth-looking chap who, again, we all sort of liked his live shows and stuff like that. So it was just very interesting because, getting stuff from the other across, from America wasn't that easy. But, when you liked something, you really had to sort of, go through the secondhand record shops to find all these obscure vinyls. And then, if you like Richard Pryor, you like Lenny Bruce or vice versa. They were those kind of commentators, weren't they?
What's so interesting about this? It's really great to hear that was something that you guys were attracted to. On our end, it was really exciting. It was so different to Monty Python or Faulty Towers or uh, what's that show? Blackadder.
Oh,
Like that
yes.
kind of humor. We thought it was just amazing because it was such a brilliant for us. Such a we can understand it because it's English, but it's such a different type of humor. So intelligent and sarcastic, and such a brilliant use of the language. And
Yes. I suppose we also had Faulty Towers, didn't we? And then
Faulty Towers, yeah. So we were really into those English shows too. Like they would come on really late on
yes.
TV, and we'd like get together, and then those. So having Richard Pryor on one end, and then Monty Python on the other, Rowan Atkins on the other. So again, that kind of cross pollination.
Yes, no, I think when you're at a certain age, there is this sort of obsession with like wanting to listen to everything that you can get hold of, and like French cinema, Italian cinema. You just kind of want to. It's a mystery, you want to watch, Paris, Texas, or Betty Blue, or any of these kind of Wings of Desire, and any obscure films that are a bit arty, just because you're kind of curious. And also, there were some really grim films, documentary film about kids living on the street, which I can't. Oh, it was a horrendous film. But you went to the cinema to. Pardon?
I think it was called Kids.
It might have been, yeah. I will have to Google this and find it. But there was one that was all about, street kids, and it was in the 80s. And you went to an art cinema in the Tuesday afternoon when it was really cheap, and just got depressed watching it, but felt that you should watch it because it's an important thing. Yeah.
It's called Kids. Actually, there's a circle there. The woman, Lee Blake, who invited me to the Black Ball where I met Bowie, I think she was the executive director of that movie, Kids, or co-directed it, or it was one of her kind of claims to fame.
Right.
And what's really awesome about that film? It launched a lot of careers, unknown kids that became, known actors. But those were really street kids. Those were really New York street kids.
Yes.
So
We
it was
also
very,
watched
very authentic.
Well, absolutely. And then we also watched films like The Warriors as well, which we thought was
Yeah.
very impressive. Was that very authentic, by the way?
No, not at all. It was that movie is based on a Greek myth. It was like it's an awesome movie, but not. I mean, there was a lot of gang culture in New York, but it didn't quite look like that. It didn't look that shiny. But what a great movie, yeah.
But we also watched the Scorsese movies, Taxi Driver and Mean Streets, which
Sure.
just gave you a bit of realism, I suppose. So
Yeah, yeah.
we love those. So as the 80s progressed and we had Thatcher, you had Reagan, and Reaganomics was kind of a bit hit and miss. Thatcherism was a bit hit and miss as well. But we had the Falkland War, then we had the miners' strikes, so the unions got blasted. Then there was the Greenham Common with the nuclear bombs on the UK soil, and Russia was getting very twitchy as well. So we thought the world was going to end. So it all added to a certain sense of, oh, what's the point in anything? And there was no opportunity career-wise or jobs particularly that you kind of thought about. So you just were living day to day and not really being too obsessed about a career. How was your kind of up to the mid-80s period?
Sounds very similar. It sounds very similar. It felt there was a lot happening artistically, musically, stylistically. Um, but yeah, it was really bleak. It felt very, very hopeless. And um, maybe out of that hopelessness, there was a need to express, maybe that's why so many things happened at that time culturally. But yeah, economically it was bleak. And yeah, the city uh was in the process of change. Like it was really in the 90s, towards the late part of the 90s, where things started to change as far as
Yes.
gentrification and I mean, back then they were called yuppies now, and then they got called hipsters. I don't know what they're called now, but we kind of foresaw that things were changing.
Yes. And did you, at that stage, I mean, I haven't actually mentioned Studio 54. Had that ever come on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, Studio 54 was a little glitzy, a little, you had to have more money to hang out at Studio 54. I did go a couple times. A friend of mine performed, so I was backstage, but it wasn't a place I would hang out. There was a place called Paradise Garage, which I hope one day gets to be known as well as Studio 54, because in many ways it was as important or more important uh, to the city, to the culture, to disco, to house music, um, to uh, the gay community, the black and brown community. Paradise Garage was our Studio 54.
Yes. And at that also, the 80s had the whole AIDS um, epidemic. Was that horrendous for you to sort of navigate through that kind of period,
Yeah,
because there was so much fear and misinformation, plus
yeah,
also people were starting to die, and had
right.
you come across Keith Haring and Basquiat by this point?
Oh yeah. So here are my quick Keith Haring and Basquiat stories. I I was coming home from CBGB's one night, and I was drunk, and I saw this chalk drawing on an empty subway poster. Between the time that they put up a new advertisement, it's just the black like a chalkboard, and there was a chalk drawing I thought was kind of cute. I used to carry a knife, so I cut it out, rolled it up, took it home, put it on my wall, and I had it stuck up on the wall with thumbtacks for a couple months. But my friends kept making fun of it. They were like, "What is this? It's not. This looks like kids' art. It's not graffiti. What is it?" And one day I was cleaning up. I just ripped it up and threw it away. Years
Oh,
later, years later, I realized it was an original Keith Haring. Um,
yeah.
and the thing about Basquiat is Basquiat used to hang out at the Mud Club, and the Mud Club was an interesting place because they had bouncers that curated the crowd, and they would let a certain amount of black men in. You had to look edgy, but not scary,
Yeah.
because they wanted the crowd. They wanted that downtown, uptown mix, and I would get in. And a couple of times that I went, Basquiat was there, and he was probably the only other black guy there. And I would watch him. I didn't know who he was. I just thought he was interesting because he's another black guy, a little older than me, seemed to know everybody, and I just thought he was soft. Um, and so I always say that, like, I remember seeing him drink a Heineken, put it down, walk away from it, and never come back to it, which was to me outrageous. Like, who could ever do that? And I thought, I'm gonna rob this guy when he leaves here. I'm gonna stick his ass up because he's a punk. Years later, I realized it was Basquiat. Um, again, there was so much happening in the city at that time that you didn't know who was going to blow up or who was special, or you know. Um, so I never spoke to him, but I definitely we were definitely in the same room and definitely eyed each other up.
Yes. Thought that would have been interesting. So when did the Boilers, your band, when did they form, and how long did they go for?
We Boilers formed in Lower East Side. There was a bar called Lucy's on Avenue A where a lot of ska kids, skinhead kids, two-tone kids hung out. It was like their home bar. And a friend of mine was in so there was a mini ska third wave revival. It's quite popular for a while in the mid 80s in New York. And this was sort of that bar was sort of the home bar for the bands, the Toasters and Second Step, um, and so I was hanging out there, and that's where I met uh, the guys that would become the Boilers. And they had already had the band; they just invited me to play drums. Um, but when I joined the band, it kind of changed the sound because
Right.
I was coming with a really heavy reggae background, so it kind of added an authenticity to the sound.
Yes. So you appear on the album Rockin' Steady. Were you
Yeah.
on all the tracks at this
Oh
stage?
yeah. 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 Yeah.
Right. So you brought it out, and there you go. That's quite something. And this was kind of 88 time, isn't it?
Was that 88?
I
I
think
think,
so.
by the time Rockin' Steady came out, we had already broken up.
Oh, classic.
Yeah,
Classic.
classic.
It's a classic moment. Was it just kind of had people got exhausted with it?
Yeah, I think it was young egos and a lot of uh, a lot of drugs and inconsistencies um, I think that the scene itself was sort of petering out. Although
Right.
it picked up again in California with bands that came out of California in the early '90s, like No Doubt and
Wait,
what
what
was that?
about Fishbone? Were they?
Oh, Fishbone was our heroes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Ma and Pa, what a song.
what a great song, great
Yeah.
album.
And at that stage, we'd also got very excited by the go-go scene and people like Trouble Funk. Did they also come onto your radar as well, thinking, oh my God, this is amazing? Drop the
Not
bomb.
as much. I mean, there's Chuck Brown's "Bustin' Loose." Like, there's some that are just forever classics. But I feel like being in New York, we had so much going on in New York, our own sound, sort of the birthplace of hip hop, and um, oh yeah, I wasn't paying much attention to the go-go scene, although I love it.
Yes. And then sort of what's your next direction from the late 80s into the 90s? How do you navigate this period?
Musically,
Yeah, and just life. What's your next direction?
well, I mean, I'm a sober alcoholic. I'll be uh, 25 years clean and sober next month, God willing. And I got sober in 2001. So mid 90s to the end of the 90s, I was really a mess. Uh, and so I was playing music whenever I could, but and I started getting into a lot of jungle and what goes along with jungle? Why am I losing this? Break
Jungle.
beats and
Right. Okay. And
uh,
God. Yeah.
I
So
can't remember. Yeah, I can't
trip
remember.
hop.
And why
There's trip hop. People like Tricky and
trip hop? Oh yeah. So still, it's funny you say that because I was thinking about this yesterday. Portishead Dummy was probably definitely in my top 10 albums of all time. So we were really influenced. And there's another example of like the hybrid of like hearing the influence of hip hop, but then coming through a really British lens, you know. Um, yeah, trip hop, Tricky, and more Chiba, and uh, but then yeah, Ronnie Size and Goldie and stuff. So I was really into that uh, mid '90s, as well as what was happening with grunge uh, and that music that was happening, you know, out of Seattle.
yes. Well, we loved that scene for a few years. It all was going well. So how did you then sort of hook up with Sade? How did this kind of moment happen in life during the sort of early 90s?
That would have been no, that would have been towards the end of the '90s, I
Was
think.
it?
Well, it was when No Ordinary Love came out, so whenever that was, because that was what the music we were playing. I was playing with the in a band with an actor named Gary Dordan, who's on CSI and Predator and did a lot at that time. He's a really beautiful guy, and we were playing at a place called Nell's, which was sort of that black bohemian place to be. We played one night and Prince was in the audience. I had no idea. Um, but the Sade thing, we played, and when I was packing up my gear, Stuart Matheson, I didn't know who he was at the time, came on stage and said, you know, would you be interested in filling in for our drummer? He's having some visa problems. Um, and we have a Top of the Pops uh, shoot in 2 days. And it was being filmed in a place in Queens, the soundstage in Queens. So I had to learn the song, but I really just played along with it. Um, and you know, Stuart Matheson's a genius, but he's also a really humble guy. So the way he asked was almost like I was going to say no. How could I possibly say no, you know? Uh, and they picked me up in a limousine and they brought me out to the soundstage, and I didn't have the proper clothes, so I wore the keyboard player's suit, and Sade came to my dressing room after the shoot and thanked me, gave me a kiss, and stole my heart.
Yes, well, absolutely. My God, that must have been, was that quite surreal, suddenly finding yourself in the...
Absolutely, absolutely. But you know, again, it's weird that when these things are happening, at least for me, in the moment, you, I kind of didn't realize the impact of it. You know, because well, I was active alcoholic and addict, and I was working a part-time job, uh, trying to make ends meet. And the next day, I had to go to work early in the morning. So it kind of, yeah, it was surreal. Like last night, I got kissed on the lips by Sade, and here I am, a clerk in an art store, making minimum wage the next morning. It didn't feel real, you know.
No, well, absolutely. And was that the only time you played with her, or did you do more? That was it.
No, it was the only thing. It was the only time we played. However, and this is in the book Concrete Dreamland. I got a call 2 days um, after that shoot, and it was Stuart Matheson again, and he said, "Hey, you know, our drummer is still having problems with his visa, and we have tour dates in the States. Would you be interested in filling in? Uh, the only the only caveat is that you have to kind of tell me with by tomorrow because we have to have a drummer." Uh,
Yes.
and I told him I'd get. He said, call me by noon tomorrow and let me know. And I told him I absolutely would. And of course, it would have been a life-changing thing to play with Sade, and I loved her music and I loved her, and it would have been the opportunity of a lifetime, of more money than I've ever received. But I started worrying that I wouldn't be able to get the drugs and the drink that I needed, and fear crept in, and I never called them. Uh, and so they went on with the tour. I think they got another drummer to fill in.
Oh my God. Yeah. Just
Yeah,
life, isn't it? These things happen. How does then the Easy Star All Stars, how does that sort of evolve and develop? Because that again this is one of those projects that really does capture a moment, doesn't it?
absolutely. And like so much in my life, it happened very organically and kind of. I had no idea that it was going to go on to be such a thing. I don't know if you know who Angela Davis is. She was a radical. Uh,
Oh yes. Yeah, yeah, of
yeah,
course.
I did a talk with her maybe 10 years ago, and after the talk, she took me aside and she said, I'm very good friends with Roger Waters and Pink Floyd. And I said, that's amazing. She said, he called me and said, there's this album that is a reinterpretation of Dark Side of the Moon that's amazing. And she said, when they were on the phone, the music was playing in the background and he was so excited. And so Dark Side of the Moon, like knowing that Roger Waters uh, was listening to it and digging it, and then also was apparently one of John Lydon's favorites. Anyway, one of the guys in the Boilers, Victor Axelrod, who's one of my best friends, went on to be a great producer, reggae producer, goes by the name of Tikla. And he works with, uh, he's on the Amy Winehouse. He played piano on the Amy Winehouse Back
Right.
to Black album. He's down with oh my God, why can't I remember the name of this collective? Dap Kings.
Right.
He got approached about the project through another friend, and he said he wouldn't do it unless I played the drums. Um, and so Dub Side of the Moon was really he and I interpreting um, Dark Side of the Moon in reggae. Um, Although I don't really get credit for it, I did a lot of the arrangement of that album. I got paid $600 to do that album and 2 CDs, and that's all I've ever gotten from that album. I also did the background vocals in that you hear, on the original Dark Side of the Moon. There's a lot of underground conversation going on
Yeah.
um, in a very northern English accent. I did that on Dub Side of the Moon, but in a Jamaican accent. I didn't get credit for that either.
God, God, it's always tricky, isn't it? Really, these projects are great, but they yeah, leave you chewed up, really. Did you? I mean, the 90s was quite an interesting period musically because it starts quite well with, say, Nirvana and certain bands, but then by the end it finishes in Woodstock '99 with these kind of heavy rap bands. It's very nihilistic and sort of there doesn't feel like there's a lot of thought going into it. I don't know if you seen the film Woodstock '99, where 3 days of hell and mayhem, and it sort of ends up sort of all the kids are just going wild. They become very feral. It's quite horrendous, but worth watching because you think, God, it's gone badly and it's going to get worse by Sunday night, and by the end, it's absolutely just complete breakdown of society. So it finishes kind of. I just wonder how you dealt with the '90s as well, sort of musically and culturally.
Well, I mean, that sounds like I've never seen that film, but it sounds like my life. Like it was starting out well, and it started crashed and burned uh, through the mid '90s to the end of the '90s. I was just so controlled by alcoholism and drug addiction that uh, and drug addiction and alcoholism, it just steals your life. So there were so many opportunities and embarrassing moments and depraved moments, and uh, I had to hit a bottom, and I did in 2000, 2001. But the last couple of years of the '90s is just me just trying to maintain some semblance of health and um, while being controlled by these substances. So I, I was doing music and art, but not seriously and with no real direction.
Yes. So then what was the change that you had that sort of put you onto another path in life?
It was just that, it was just reaching that point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I had lost so much. I lost my fiance, and I was in really bad health and unemployable. I was just really broken, and it became very clear to me that if I continued on the way I was, and I was approaching 40, um, I was going to die, and not just die a wretch. And so I had a moment of grace that not everyone gets, unfortunately. My uncles, who were my heroes, all died, all before they were 50 years old, of active addiction and alcoholism. My older brother died as well. So I just had a moment of grace where I had the clarity to realize that I need to save my life. And so I got into a 12-step program and um, rebuilt, really.
Yes. And was your mother still alive at this stage?
Yeah, she's still alive now. God bless her.
Fantastic. Well, then that's good. Did you keep a relationship with her at all?
Yeah, we're in love now. She's like my best friend. But through a lot of that time, I was so distant and so self-involved that I wasn't really in touch with her. And she also has her own issues. But she's just very proud of me, and that really means the world to me. Um,
Yes.
she's just an amazing person.
So then in the O years, what's your next direction? You go to the 12-step program, and then how do you navigate that next bit?
Well, I mean, the first few years of sobriety was just me trying to deal with the wreckage uh, that the previous 10 years, uh, of active addiction and alcoholism had caused in my life. Financial wreckage and emotional wreckage and relationship wreckage, and just really trying to find myself as a sober man. And so I worked really hard. The first 6 years of my sobriety, I worked 7 days a week uh, for 6 years straight. I didn't take any vacations or any time off because I just had so much financial um, amends to make.
Yes.
Uh, and then I was just learning. I was just learning how to grow up. You know.
Yes. And then, so then how does your art and career then sort of, go forward after the O years into the teen period?
Yeah, I got jobs in art supply stores from the mid '90s just because I needed a job. And I had a friend who worked in the art store, and I got a job, and that job allowed me to start learning more about art and art supplies. And of course, I would steal a lot of art supplies, so I got to experiment and play and realize that it was something that I really loved, but I never took seriously at all. And then when I got sober, I got a uh, I got teaching artist jobs, even though I wasn't qualified at all, um, where I would go along and teach art projects to kids in public school. And that led to me becoming the program director of a huge nonprofit that does community murals here in the city.
Right.
And I was working with some brilliant artists. I wasn't doing art, but I was working with brilliant artists and watching them. And at some point, I realized uh, that I wasn't living in my purpose. I'm not an administrator. I'm not built to be a program director. I really needed to make art, and so I took the leap. I quit that job, which is something that doesn't happen in my family. Um, and I took that job to really dedicate my time and life full time to creating art and music. And that was in 2017.
God, that's amazing. Yes. And then when did you decide you were going to write your memoir, your book?
I had been writing little vignettes and sharing them on Facebook from my life for years. Just as as I thought of something that I thought was unusual or entertaining or funny, I would just share it. And whenever I did that, people would always really love the stories. But for years, I'd hear like, "Well, when are you going to write the next one? And maybe you should think about putting these in a book, because if you did, I'd buy it." And for years, I ignored that. And then, like so often in my life, at some point, a light bulb went off, and I thought, it would be interesting if I compiled all these stories into a book of some sort. And the first incarnation of the book was just short stories on themes. So I had a chapter on drugs. I had a chapter on race relations, a chapter on things that I've experienced on the train. Um, and they were all basically little vignettes from my life. And when I started to take it seriously, I reached out and asked a friend of mine who's an author, Jacqueline Woodson, if she'd give me time in her retreat to actually put it all together. And the first manuscript was 550 pages. so so we trimmed it down quite a bit. However, I think I got another book just waiting, because I have so many stories, so many magical stories. Yeah, so like so much in my life, I kind of stumbled into it, and got very lucky.
And did that feel, writing it, then probably rewriting it, processing it, did that all have quite a effect on you, sort of emotionally, sort of processing a lot of things that had happened as well?
Yeah, it was cathartic. There was a lot of moments where I cried, a lot of moments where I laughed. The book is very vulnerable and very raw, and very, very honest. And so there were a lot of cringy moments too that made me think about things I've done, places I've been. Um, yeah, it was a purge of sorts. But one of the beautiful things about being in the 12-step program is one of the steps talks about being fearless and thorough in your self inventory. Um, and so I learned how to tell stories, how to be honest, how to be vulnerable, how to face my demons uh, through the process of getting sober. So the book was very specific to me, obviously, but uh, there's so much in it that I think people might be able to relate to, because they're just uh, general themes in a way.
Yes. And do you find, because you obviously built such a life now and you've got a partner and a child, does it feel both because you're so much more aware and sober, do you also have sort of moments of slight worry that you've got so much now and you're thinking, God, I just want it to be like this for the next 40 years or 30 years?
Might
Does
get
that give
40.
you a sense of, like, value? I mean,
No, no. I mean, I live in such a state of gratitude, and I really try my best to live in the moment. I have a really strong meditation practice. Um, and so I just do what needs to be done, the next thing that needs to be done, and I don't contemplate that idea of like, this is so great and I want to continue this. I take life as it comes. I do try to look at life not dualistically, but more like polarities. It's such an up and down process, and it's all good. Every bit of it is great. My partner is amazing. She just performed for Macron at the state dinner in France and sat at his table. So proud of her. She's an amazing musician.
yes. And how did you meet?
I did her album cover art. She reached out to me randomly and loved my art and asked if I might be interested in doing the art for her cover. We met. We were supposed to meet for half an hour just to discuss the details of the art, and 8 hours later we were still talking. And that's how it's been. And that was a week before the pandemic hit.
Right. God, that dreadful period, wasn't it? Well, it was a period. Yes, blimey, and that was the beginning, really. So, what did you do during the pandemic period? This sort of the first 2 or 3 years.
Oh, I did a
We,
lot of art.
you did a lot of art. I mean, it
I
probably
did.
wasn't a bad.
It was a blessing in a way, for artists or writers, I imagine. Uh, it was sort of a blessing, that forced isolation, because I was painting so much, uh, just because there was really not much more I could do that was safe. And Céline was back in France. She's her family's from Martinique, but she lives in France. So we would just spend hours on the phone. Um, and yeah, and I think my art career really took off during that time.
Yes. So the book's come out. What have you got lined up for your next project this year, going into next year, as we trundle through this interesting decade?
Interesting decade. Well, I have quite a bit of work promoting the book in the upcoming months. Um, I just did a huge mural for Jill Scott in Philadelphia, and there might be another really great blessing coming out of my collaboration with her. She's become a very good friend, um, but I can't speak on it yet.
No.
Uh, my band Lionsgate just dropped another album, which I'm really proud of, called Algorithm. It's available on most streaming um, platforms, and we go back into the studio in August to work on a third Lionsgate album, but then a side project called Strike Generation, which is going back to our punk rock rebellious roots.
Blimey. Is this all on your Facebook page, by the way?
Some is on my Instagram page, yes.
Right. So if you want to hear the music, is it on streaming services as well?
It is. Yeah, Spotify and Bandcamp and Amazon. Yeah, it's out there.
Brilliant. I will have to check this out. I hadn't
Please do,
sort.
yeah.
I will. I will. God. Yeah. So it's all. So I'll put a link, in the notes below when I put this out. But yeah. So you've got
And
those
please put
albums.
a link to the book, right?
I will put a link to the book. I'll definitely put a link
Yes.
to the book. But yes, and you've got your new house that you're just renovating as well.
Yeah, that house is a family house. It's been in the family for generations. However, it fell into disrepair, and my mom wouldn't move forward with renovations. And my mom, I love her, but she does have an issue with hoarding and neglect. And so the house was about to be taken back from the city. It's a beautiful brownstone in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And so I bought it from my mom, and I've been renovating it slowly as a family home and a legacy for my family. And we had a terrible contractor who stole my mom's life savings and most of mine. So we kind of had to start from scratch, but we're close, and hopefully I'll be moving in next week.
Oh my
It's
God,
a
that is
dream.
fantastic. God,
Oh, it's an absolute dream.
it is a dream. But yes, I've got it, Lionsgate. So there was that album. Did you say there was another album as well?
There's two albums. The first album is called Portal, and the second is called Algorithm.
Got you.
And
Cool.
they're interesting. I think I'm working with two brilliant musicians, and we kind of just get together and jam and uh, play from our influences and loves. So
Yes.
there's everything on those albums.
Fantastic. Well, look, this has been fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much. This
Thank you,
has
David.
been amazing. And what I'll do, I'll put it out and I'll, send you a link, and then you put it on your Facebook page, and
Absolutely.
and that's it. But I've been also very much enjoying hearing you reading the book on Spotify as well.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I haven't heard the audio version yet. I'm
Oh,
a
right.
little
It's
I'm a
there.
little nervous. Yeah. I'm actually a little nervous to hear myself read the book. But thank you so much, David.
Yes. Well, look, I'll keep in touch, but thank you again, Pat. And that, dear listener, is the end of the interview. A massive thank you to Patrick for giving me the time for the interview. As I said, he's got a new book out, which is Absolutely fantastic, which is titled Concrete Dreamland, available from all good bookshops and online. I know I've already said that. Anyway, look, this has been the C86 show. David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 show. And also, all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.